The cold bit through Katherine Kane's thin nightgown like teeth as she pounded on the locked cabin door, her small fists already numb and useless. 20 years old, and left outside like a dog because she had dared to refuse the marriage her father had arranged with the cattle baron from Prescott, a man 40 years her senior with hands that reminded her of dead things. Papa, please. Her voice cracked in the December wind that howled through the high country of northern Arizona. The snow had started falling an hour ago, maybe more. Time became strange when you were freezing to death. I'm sorry, please let me in. But Thomas Kane was a hard man who had grown harder after her mother died, giving birth to a stillborn son 5 years back. He believed in breaking things until they bent to his will, whether it was horses, cattle, or daughters who thought they had a say in their own futures. Catherine had seen him break a colt's spirit in 3 days once. She had cried for that horse. Now she wondered if anyone would cry for her. Her legs gave out and she slumped against the rough-hewn logs of the cabin wall, tucking herself into as small a ball as possible. The snow was already accumulating on her dark hair, melting against her scalp before freezing again. Her father's ranch sat 8 miles outside of Ash Fork, Arizona, far enough from town that no one would hear her screaming. The pine trees surrounding the property created walls of darkness beyond the small circle of the porch. She thought about running for town, but her bare feet were already losing feeling and the road was treacherous even in daylight. I'll die out here, she whispered to herself. And the words should have terrified her, but instead brought a strange calm. At least she would die on her own terms rather than living as property to a man whose breath smelled of whiskey and whose previous 2 wives had died under mysterious circumstances. The wind picked up, driving snow into her face like needles. Catherine closed her eyes and thought of warmer times, of her mother braiding her hair and singing Swedish lullabies, of the wildflowers that bloomed in the meadow each spring. The cold was becoming almost comfortable now, a heavy blanket pulling her down into darkness. She did not hear the horse approaching through the storm. She did not hear the rider dismount or the sharp intake of breath when he saw her huddled form. She only became aware of the world again when strong arms lifted her from the ground, and a deep voice said, "Good God, what kind of monster does this?" Catherine tried to open her eyes, but her lashes were frozen together. She felt herself being wrapped in something warm and heavy, a coat that smelled of leather and horse and tobacco. Then she was moving, cradled against a broad chest that radiated heat like a stove. "Hold on," the voice said, closer now. "Just hold on. I've got you." She wanted to tell him to let her be, that her father would be angry, that everything would be worse if she survived this. But her tongue would not work, and the darkness was pulling at her again, gentler this time, less final. She gave in to it. Carter Mitchell had been riding back to his small ranch after delivering a string of horses to a buyer in Flagstaff when the storm caught him. He knew these mountains well enough to navigate them half blind, but even he had considered stopping to wait it out. Then his roan mare had whinnied and tossed her head, alerting him to something off the trail. Horse sense was real, and Carter had learned to trust it. What he found made his blood run cold, despite the years he had spent seeing the worst of what men could do to each other. A girl, barely more than a slip of a thing, frozen nearly solid against the wall of a cabin. Through the small window, he could see lamplight and the silhouette of a man sitting at a table, calmly eating his supper. Carter had wanted to kick that door down and beat the man senseless, but the girl in his arms was dying, and she mattered more than his rage. So he had wrapped her in his winter coat, mounted his horse with her in his arms, and turned toward his own place 3 miles north. His ranch was modest, just a small cabin and barn with a dozen horses, but it had a good fireplace and warm blankets and no monsters disguised as fathers. The ride seemed to take hours, though it was probably only 40 minutes. The girl never stirred, her breathing so shallow he had to keep checking to make sure she was still alive. His mare seemed to sense the urgency and picked her way through the snow-covered trail with steady determination. When they finally reached his cabin, Carter dismounted carefully and kicked open his door. not caring about the snow that blew in behind him. He laid the girl on his bed and immediately set about building up the fire, his hands working automatically while his mind raced. He had seen frostbite before, had even lost 2 toes to it himself after a bad winter 10 years back. You had to warm someone slowly, or you could do more harm than good. Once the fire was roaring, he turned his attention back to the girl. Her nightgown was soaked through and frozen in places. He hesitated, aware of propriety, but more aware that she would die if he left her in wet clothes. Moving quickly and keeping his eyes averted as much as possible, he stripped off the nightgown and wrapped her in dry blankets, piling them high. Her skin was white as the snow outside, her lips blue. He checked her fingers and toes, relieved to see they were pale but not black. She might keep them all if she was lucky. He made himself coffee and sat in the chair beside the bed, watching her breathe. Now that the immediate crisis was handled, anger crept back in. What kind of father did this? He had heard stories of Thomas Kane, the hard-edged rancher who ran his property like a feudal kingdom, but this went beyond hard into evil. Around midnight, the girl began to shiver. Carter knew this was good, her body fighting back against the cold, but the violence of it alarmed him. Her teeth chattered so hard he worried she might break them. He added another blanket, then another, but still she shook. Finally, he made a decision that probably was not proper, but felt necessary. He stripped down to his union suit, climbed under the blankets beside her, and carefully pulled her against his chest, sharing his body heat. She was like ice against him, but he held firm, rubbing her arms and back gently to encourage circulation. Slowly, over the course of an hour, the shivering lessened. Her skin began to warm. Her breathing deepened, and Carter, exhausted from the long day and the stress, found his own eyes growing heavy. He told himself he would just rest for a moment. He was asleep within minutes. Katherine woke to warmth and confusion. The last thing she remembered was the cold, the terrible, paralyzing cold, and now she was surrounded by heat. A fire crackled somewhere nearby. She was wrapped in blankets that smelled unfamiliar, cedar and smoke and something masculine, and there was an arm around her waist, heavy and solid. She went rigid, memory flooding back, her father locking her out, the snow, a voice in the darkness, strong arms lifting her. Had her father relented? But no, this was not her bed, not her cabin. Where was she? Katherine opened her eyes and found herself staring at rough log walls illuminated by firelight. She turned her head slowly and discovered she was not alone in the bed. A man lay beside her, his face turned toward her, still asleep. He was probably 30, maybe a bit younger, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and a few days' worth of stubble on his strong jaw. Even in sleep, his face had a serious quality to it, stern but not cruel. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt strangely safe. This man had saved her life. She understood that instinctively. But who was he? As if sensing her gaze, his eyes opened. They were gray, the color of storm clouds, and they focused on her with immediate alertness. "You're awake," he said, his voice rough with sleep. Then he seemed to realize the position they were in and carefully pulled his arm back, putting space between them. "How do you feel?" "Cold," Katherine said, though she was not really. "Confused. Where am I?" "My ranch, about 3 miles north of where I found you." He sat up, keeping the blanket around his waist. "Name's Carter Mitchell. Found you outside a cabin last night, half frozen to death. You remember any of that?" It came back in pieces. The locked door, her father's silence, the growing certainty that she would die. "My father," she whispered. "He locked me out." Something dangerous flickered in Carter's gray eyes. "Why?" "I refused to marry the man he chose for me." She pulled the blankets tighter around herself, suddenly aware that she was not wearing her nightgown. "I told him I would rather die alone than live as that man's wife. I suppose he decided to test my conviction. Thomas Kane. Carter said it like a curse. I should have known. That man has a reputation for being as mean as a rattlesnake and twice as venomous. You know him. Know of him. We've never had dealings, and after last night, we never will. Carter stood, turning his back to give her privacy. I'll get some coffee going and find you something to wear. Your nightgown was soaked through. I had to get you out of it or you'd have frozen. I tried to be respectful about it. Heat flooded Catherine's face, but she believed him. There was something solid and trustworthy about Carter Mitchell, something that reminded her of bedrock. Thank you, she said quietly, for saving me, for being decent. Any man would have done the same. You would be surprised what men do, Katherine said, thinking of her father, of the cattle baron, of all the men who had looked at her like something to be owned rather than someone to be known. You did more than most would have. Carter glanced back at her, something unreadable in his expression. Rest a bit longer. When you're ready, we'll figure out what comes next. He dressed quickly, pulling on canvas pants and a heavy wool shirt, and set about making coffee and breakfast. Katherine watched him move around the small cabin with efficient grace. The space was simple but well maintained, everything in its place. A gun belt hung by the door. A bookshelf held a surprising collection of volumes. The bed she occupied took up one corner, a small table and chairs another. A cast iron stove stood against one wall, the fireplace against another. This is your home? She asked. Such as it is. I breed and train horses, sell them to ranchers, army forts, whoever needs good mounts. Make enough to get by. He cracked eggs into a pan. Not fancy, but it's mine. No one tells me what to do or who to be. That sounds like heaven, Katherine said softly. Carter looked at her again. Really looked, and she felt seen in a way she rarely had been. What's your name? I never asked. Katherine Kane. Well, Katherine Kane, the question is what you want to do now. I can take you back to your father's place. Though I'd rather eat glass, I can take you into Ash Fork and help you find somewhere to stay. Or you can stay here until you figure things out. I'll sleep in the barn. You would do that? Let a stranger stay in your home? You're not a stranger. You're someone who nearly died rather than surrender her freedom. That tells me what I need to know about your character. He slid scrambled eggs onto 2 tin plates and brought one to her. Eat, then we'll talk more. Katherine took the plate with trembling hands. The smell of the food made her stomach clench with hunger. She could not remember the last time she had eaten, probably yesterday's breakfast before the argument with her father had exploded. She ate quickly, barely tasting it, just grateful for the warmth and substance. Carter ate standing by the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. The storm had passed, leaving everything buried under at least a foot of fresh powder. We got lucky, he said. Another hour in that cold, and you would not have made it. Maybe that would have been easier, Katherine said quietly. Don't talk like that. Carter turned to face her, his expression fierce. Your life is worth more than whatever your father thinks, more than whatever that rancher wanted to buy. You get to decide what your life means, nobody else. Easy words for a man. You've always had that freedom. You think so? Carter laughed, but there was no humor in it. I grew up on a ranch in Texas, expected to follow in my father's footsteps, marry the girl he chose, live the life he planned. Instead, I left at 17 with nothing but a horse and the clothes on my back. Spent 10 years drifting, learning horses, learning what kind of man I wanted to be. My father never spoke to me again before he died. So no, I did not always have freedom. I took it and I paid the price. Katherine studied him with new eyes. Do you regret it? Not for a single second. He came and sat in the chair beside the bed. Freedom has a cost, Katherine, but slavery costs more. Even when it comes with a comfortable prison, you already know that, or you would not have refused your father. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe she could have the kind of life he described. But women had fewer options than men, fewer paths to independence. What can I possibly do? I have no money, no skills beyond keeping house and mending and cooking. I cannot go back to my father, but I have nowhere else to go. Then stay here, Carter said simply. Help me around the ranch. I could use someone to handle the house, and I'm behind on mending tack. In exchange, you get room and board and time to figure out your next step. No strings, no expectations, just two people helping each other out. Why would you do this for me? Carter was quiet for a long moment. Because nobody did it for me when I needed it. Because I know what it's like to be desperate and alone. And because leaving you to fend for yourself when you just survived your father trying to kill you sits wrong with me. Tears pricked Catherine's eyes. She had not cried last night in the snow, had not cried when her father locked the door, but this unexpected kindness broke something open inside her. All right, she whispered. I'll stay, just for a little while, until I can figure something else out. Stay as long as you need. Carter stood and moved away, giving her space to compose herself. Now, about clothes. I've got some old things that might work if you cinch them up. Not pretty, but warmer than what you had. He produced a worn pair of pants, a flannel shirt, and thick wool socks. Catherine took them gratefully, and Carter stepped outside to give her privacy to dress. The clothes swamped her, but with the pants rolled and the shirt tucked, they worked well enough. She found a piece of rope to use as a belt and emerged feeling more human than she had in hours. Carter had cleared the breakfast dishes and was pulling on his heavy coat. I need to check on the horses, make sure they weathered the storm all right. You're welcome to come with me or stay warm by the fire. I'll come. Catherine did not want to be alone just yet, did not want time to think about everything that had happened. Action felt safer than reflection. Outside, the world had been transformed into something pristine and beautiful. The sun was rising, casting pink and gold light across the snow. The air was brutally cold, but still, the storm's fury spent. Carter's boots crunched as he led the way to the barn, and Catherine followed in his footsteps literally, using his tracks to make the walking easier. The barn was warmer than outside, heated by the bodies of the horses. There were 8 of them, Carter explained, in various stages of training. He moved among them with easy confidence, checking each one, distributing hay and grain, speaking to them in a low voice that Catherine found soothing. You love them, she observed, watching him stroke the nose of a black gelding. More than most people, Carter admitted. Horses are honest. They do not lie or manipulate. If you treat them well, they return it. Simple. Unlike people. Unlike people, he agreed. He showed her how he liked the feed measured out, where the tack was stored, how to check hooves for stones or ice. Catherine absorbed it all, grateful to have something to focus on besides the disaster her life had become. They worked together for an hour, falling into an easy rhythm. Carter was a good teacher, patient and clear, never making her feel stupid for not knowing something. When they finished, Catherine's hands were cold, but her heart felt lighter than it had in months. Back in the cabin, Carter made more coffee, and they sat at the small table, warming their hands on the tin cups. Outside, the world was still and white and quiet. Your father will come looking for you, Carter said eventually. When he finds you here, there will be trouble. I know. Catherine stared into her coffee. He'll say you ruined me, that I'm compromised. He'll demand you marry me or face charges of kidnapping. Let him talk. I saved your life. Any judge would see that. You don't know my father. He has friends, influence. The truth does not matter as much as the story he tells. Carter drummed his fingers on the table, thinking. Then we need a better story. You could claim you ran away, made it here on your own. That I took you in out of Christian charity and nothing more. That might work, Catherine said slowly. If anyone asks, I'll say I left before the worst of the storm, that I knew about your ranch and made for it. You were just being neighborly. All right, Carter nodded. We'll keep our stories straight, and if your father shows up here making threats, He'll find I'm not easy to push around. There was steel in his voice that made Catherine believe him. Carter Mitchell might not be looking for trouble, but he would not back down from it either. It was a quality she admired, one she wished she possessed more of herself. The next few days fell into a pattern. Catherine took over the cooking and cleaning, grateful to have work that made her feel useful. Carter was neat for a man living alone, but there was still plenty to do. She mended his shirts, washed his dishes, swept the floors. In the afternoons, she helped him with the horses, learning their personalities and quirks. The black gelding, Shadow, was her favorite, gentle and calm. Carter said he would make someone a good ranch horse once his training was complete. They talked while they worked, carefully at first, then with growing ease. Carter told her about his years drifting, about the ranches he had worked in Texas, Colorado, New Mexico. He had broken bones and hearts, he said with a slight smile, though he suspected the hearts had healed faster. Catherine told him about her mother, about the loneliness after her death, about feeling like a bird in a cage, watching the world through bars. "Did you love him?" Carter asked one evening as they sat by the fire after supper. "The man your father wanted you to marry? I barely knew him. His name is Edward Crane. He came to look me over like I was livestock he was considering purchasing. Asked to see my teeth." Catherine's laugh was bitter. "My father seemed to think that was reasonable, a good business arrangement, he called it. Mr. Crane wanted a young wife to give him sons, since his first two wives had failed to do so. The fact that both those wives died shortly after childbirth did not seem to concern my father." "You would have been the third," Carter said quietly. "Yes, and I suspect there would have been a fourth after me, and a fifth after her. Some men see women as interchangeable parts, useful only for what we can produce." She pulled her knees up to her chest, suddenly cold despite the fire. "I could not do it. Even knowing what my refusal might cost, I could not." Carter reached over and covered her hand with his. The gesture was simple, but it sent warmth racing up Catherine's arm and into her chest. "You did the right thing. Staying alive and free is worth more than comfort bought with chains." His hand lingered on hers for a moment longer, then withdrew. Catherine found herself wishing it had stayed. On the fourth day, horses approached the cabin. Carter heard them first, his body going tense and alert. He moved to the window, peering out. "3 riders, your father's in front." Catherine's stomach dropped. She had known this was coming, had tried to prepare herself, but fear still clawed at her throat. "What do we do?" "We stick to the story. You ran away, made it here on your own. I've been the perfect gentleman." Carter buckled on his gun belt, and Catherine noticed he checked to make sure his pistol was loaded. "Stay inside. Let me handle this. He's my father. I should face him. And you will, but on my terms, not his. He does not get to bully you here. This is my land." Carter's eyes met hers, steady and sure. "Trust me." Catherine nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She watched through the window as Carter stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Thomas Kane dismounted heavily, a big man running to fat, his face red with cold and anger. The 2 men with him looked like ranch hands, hired muscle to back up his authority. Catherine recognized Pete Lawson, her father's foreman, a mean man who had always watched her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Mitchell," her father said, his voice carrying clearly in the cold air, "I believe you have something that belongs to me." "I have a guest who showed up half frozen 4 days ago," Carter said calmly. "If you're referring to your daughter, she's a grown woman, not property to be owned." "That girl is my daughter and she'll do as I say. Bring her out here." "No." The single word hung in the air like a gunshot. Thomas Kane's face went from red to purple. "Boy, I do not think you understand the situation you're in. You've got my daughter living in your cabin, unchaperoned. That's a serious offense. Could see you hanged if I pushed it." "Could see you hanged too, Thomas, for leaving that girl outside in a blizzard to freeze. I'm sure the law would be interested in that story." Carter's voice remained level, but Catherine heard the steel beneath it. Or we could agree that Catherine came here of her own accord, that I've treated her with complete respect, and that she's free to make her own choices. She's 20 years old, not property. She refused a good marriage, one that would have secured her future. Now she's thrown away her reputation living here with you. The only way to salvage this is for you to marry her, make it right. I'll marry her if she wants to marry me, not because you're trying to force another bad deal. But that's between Catherine and me, not you. Catherine could not stay inside any longer. She opened the door and stepped out, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 pairs of eyes turned to her, but she focused only on her father. Papa, please, just let me go. I do not want to marry Mr. Crane. I do not want to go back. I'll sign over any claim to the ranch, any inheritance. Just let me have my freedom. Freedom? Thomas spat the word. What kind of freedom do you think you'll have, a ruined woman with no prospects? You'll end up in a brothel or begging on the streets. I'm trying to save you from yourself. You locked me outside in a blizzard. You tried to kill me. Catherine's voice shook but held firm. I will take my chances with poverty over death. Dramatic girl. I was teaching you a lesson, would have let you in when you came to your senses. Not my fault you ran off before that could happen. Carter made a sound low in his throat, something between a growl and a laugh. You keep telling yourself that, Thomas. Whatever helps you sleep at night. But here's what's going to happen. Catherine stays here as long as she wants. You're going to leave and not come back. And you're going to tell Crane the wedding's off. If you do not, I'll ride into Ash Fork and tell everyone who'll listen about how I found your daughter frozen nearly solid outside your cabin. I do not think that'll do much for your reputation. You threatening me, boy? I'm stating facts. Now get off my land. Pete Lawson's hand moved toward his gun, but Carter was faster, his pistol clearing leather with practiced ease, not quite pointing at anyone but ready. I would not, Carter said softly. The moment stretched tight as a wire. Then Thomas Kane spat in the snow and hauled himself back onto his horse. You're dead to me, he said to Catherine. You hear me? I've got no daughter. I've had no father for 5 years, Catherine said quietly. Not since Mama died. You're just making it official. Thomas jerked his horse around and rode off, his men following. They watched until the riders disappeared into the trees. Then Catherine's legs gave out and she sat down hard in the snow, shaking. Carter holstered his gun and crouched beside her. You all right? I just lost my family, everything I've ever known. She looked up at him, tears freezing on her cheeks. Why do I feel relieved? Because chains are still chains, even when they're made of blood. He offered his hand and pulled her to her feet. Come on, let's get you inside before you freeze again. Back in the warm cabin, Carter poured whiskey into 2 cups and handed her one. Drink, it'll help. Catherine drank, gasping as the liquor burned down her throat. But he was right. Warmth spread through her chest, loosening the tight knot of tension. What happens now? She asked. Now you decide what you want. You're free, Catherine, really free. Your father disowned you in front of witnesses, so he's got no more legal claim. You can stay here, or I can help you get to Flagstaff or Prescott where you might find work. Your choice. And the marriage, he demanded? Carter looked at her steadily. I meant what I said. I'll marry you if you want to marry me, but only if you want it. Not because anyone's forcing your hand. You barely know me. I know you value freedom more than comfort. I know you're brave. I know you're kind to animals, and you make excellent biscuits. That's more than most people know about their spouses on their wedding day. He set his cup down. But I'm not proposing, Catherine. I'm just saying the option exists if you ever want it. No pressure. Catherine studied him, this man who had saved her life and asked nothing in return. Carter Mitchell was handsome in a rugged way, but it was more than that. He had an integrity she rarely encountered, a core of decency that could not be faked. She felt safe with him, and more than that, she felt seen. He looked at her and saw a person, not property or possibility or problem. "I'd like to stay," she said finally, "if the offer's still open, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I want to. I like it here. I like the work, the horses, the quiet. I like—" She trailed off, not quite ready to finish that sentence. "You like what?" Carter prompted gently. "I like you," Katherine said, feeling her face heat. "You're good company, easy to talk to, and you treat me like I have a brain in my head, which is more than most men manage." A smile tugged at Carter's mouth, softening the stern lines of his face. "Well, you clearly do have a brain in your head, so it would be stupid of me to pretend otherwise. And for what it's worth, I like you too. I like having you here. The cabin's felt more like a home this week than it has in years." They looked at each other across the small table, something unspoken passing between them. Katherine felt it in her chest, a flutter like bird wings. She did not have a name for it yet, but it felt important. "Then I'll stay," she said, "and we'll figure out the rest as we go." "Deal." Carter held out his hand, and Katherine shook it, his palm warm and calloused against hers. The weeks that followed were the happiest Katherine had known in years. She and Carter fell into an easy partnership, each handling their share of the work without needing to discuss it. He taught her more about horses, and she was surprised to discover she had a talent for it. The animals responded well to her quiet voice and patient hands. The black gelding, Shadow, became her special project. Carter had said he was ready to sell, but Katherine asked if she could work with him a bit longer. There was something about the horse that called to her, a gentleness beneath his strength that reminded her of Carter himself. "You've got a gift," Carter told her one afternoon as she put Shadow through his paces in the small corral beside the barn. "He's never worked this well for me." "Maybe he just needed someone to believe in him," Katherine said, running her hand along Shadow's neck. The horse nickered and nuzzled her shoulder. "Maybe we all do," Carter said quietly, and when Katherine looked at him, she found him watching her with an expression that made her heart race. They were careful with each other, never quite crossing the line from friendship into something more, but the tension was always there, humming beneath their interactions. Katherine would catch Carter looking at her while she cooked, or she would find herself staring at the way his shoulders moved while he worked. At night, alone in his bed while he slept in the barn, she would think about that first night when he had held her to share his warmth, and she would wonder what it might be like if he held her again, for different reasons. Christmas came, and Katherine made a special dinner with supplies Carter brought from town. They ate by firelight, and afterward, Carter surprised her with a gift, a pair of riding gloves made of soft leather. "I cannot accept these," Katherine protested. They're too fine. You need them if you're going to keep working with the horses. Those hands are getting torn up." He took one of her hands in his, running his thumb over the calluses forming on her palms. "Besides, I wanted to. You've made this place feel like a real home, Katherine. That's worth more than a pair of gloves." "I got you something too," she admitted, suddenly shy. She had spent hours mending every piece of clothing he owned, carefully reinforcing seams and replacing buttons. "It's not much, but I noticed your shirts were getting ragged." Carter examined the stack of neatly folded shirts, and his expression softened. "This is perfect. Thank you." He looked at her, and the space between them felt charged. "Katherine, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" He seemed to struggle for words, this man who was usually so direct. "These past weeks, having you here, it's made me realize how lonely I've been. I thought I was happy living alone, just me and the horses, but now I know the difference. Happy and content are not the same thing. You make me happy." Katherine's breath caught. "You make me happy too. The thing is," Carter continued, "I know you came here running from something, not running toward anything in particular, and I do not want to pressure you. You should have time to figure out what you want without me complicating things, but I need you to know, in case it matters, that I've developed feelings for you. Strong ones, Carter, Katherine whispered. She moved closer, closing the distance between them. I have feelings for you, too. I have for weeks. I did not say anything because I was not sure if you felt the same, and I did not want to make things awkward. So we've been dancing around each other like fools, Carter said, a smile breaking across his face. That's ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. Katherine agreed. And then she was laughing, and Carter was laughing too, and the tension that had been building for weeks finally broke like a fever. Carter reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite his rough palms. Can I kiss you? Please, Katherine breathed, and he did. It was nothing like the wet, demanding kisses she had endured from young men at church socials, boys who thought they had a right to take whatever they wanted. This was soft and questioning, Carter's lips moving against hers with a tenderness that made her chest ache. She leaned into him, her hands coming up to rest on his shoulders, and he deepened the kiss slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not want to. She wanted to stay here forever, wrapped in his warmth, tasting coffee and Christmas dinner on his tongue. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Katherine felt dizzy. That was, she started, then stopped, not having words. Yeah, Carter agreed. He rested his forehead against hers. Katherine, I want to do this right, court you properly, give you time to be sure. But I'm hoping eventually you might consider marrying me. For real, because you want to, not because anyone's forcing anything. I want to, Katherine said immediately, then caught herself. I want to court you. See where this goes. But I already know what I'm going to say when you ask me properly. Do you now? Yes. She kissed him again, briefer this time. I'm going to say yes. Carter's smile was like sunrise, bright and warm and full of promise. Then I'll make sure to ask you properly when the time's right. They spent the rest of the evening on the small sofa Carter had in front of the fireplace, Katherine tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders. They talked about the future, about the ranch and the horses and the life they might build together. It felt right in a way Katherine had never experienced before, like pieces clicking into place. I should probably move back to the barn, Carter said eventually, though he made no move to get up. For propriety's sake. Propriety went out the window the first night I stayed here, Katherine pointed out. Besides, I trust you, and I'm tired of sleeping alone when you're right here. Katherine Kane, are you propositioning me? I'm suggesting we're both adults who care about each other and see no point in pretending otherwise. If you want to keep sleeping in the cold barn to protect my virtue, you can. But I'd rather you stayed here where it's warm. We'll save everything else for after the wedding. Carter was quiet for a moment, then nodded. All right, but I'm sleeping on the floor. We'll see, Katherine said, smiling against his shoulder. In the end, they slept in the bed together, carefully maintaining space between them, but it was enough to feel his warmth, to hear him breathing in the darkness. Katherine had never felt safer or more content. January brought bitter cold and more snow, but inside the cabin, everything was warm. Carter and Katherine worked side by side during the days and sat together by the fire at night, reading aloud or simply talking. They kissed often, learning each other slowly, never pushing too far, but always inching closer to something deeper. In February, Carter rode into Ash Fork and came back with supplies and news. Thomas Kane had officially announced that his daughter had run away, and he was washing his hands of her. Edward Crane had found a new young bride, some 16-year-old from Prescott, whose father was eager for the connection. The general consensus in town was that Katherine Kane had been foolish to throw away such a good match. Let them think what they want, Katherine said. She was kneading bread dough, her hands working the mass with practiced efficiency. I know the truth, that's enough. There's more, Carter said carefully. People are talking about us, saying we're living in sin, that I should make an honest woman of you. And what do you think? I think they should mind their own business. But I also think, he paused, coming to stand beside her, that I do not want to wait anymore. I know what I want, Catherine. I want you as my wife, legally and forever, if you're ready. Catherine's hands stilled in the dough. Are you asking? I'm asking. Carter turned her to face him, heedless of the flour on her hands. I do not have a ring yet, and this is not very romantic, but I cannot wait another day. Katherine Kane, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making you happy? Yes, Catherine said, tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes, absolutely yes. Carter kissed her hard, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. Flour scattered everywhere, and the bread dough fell to the floor forgotten, but neither of them cared. They were married 3 weeks later in Ashfork, with the minister and his wife as witnesses. Catherine wore a simple blue dress she had sewn herself, and Carter wore his best shirt and a string tie. The ceremony was brief, but when Carter slid a plain gold band onto her finger and said, I do, Catherine felt like her heart might burst from happiness. Back at the ranch, which was officially theirs now, not just his, Carter carried her over the threshold. Mrs. Mitchell, he said, setting her down gently. How does that sound? Perfect, Catherine said. It sounds perfect. That night, for the first time, they made love. Carter was patient and gentle, attentive to her needs and careful of her inexperience. He made her feel cherished, not used, and when it was over, Catherine lay in his arms, feeling fundamentally changed. She belonged to herself. She had learned that these past months, but she also belonged with Carter. The two truths did not contradict each other. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. I do not think I've said that yet, but I do. I love you so much. I love you too, Carter said, kissing her temple. I think I have since the night I found you in the snow, looking fierce even while you were freezing. You're the bravest person I've ever met. I'm not brave, I'm just stubborn. Same thing sometimes. He pulled her closer, and Catherine felt herself drifting towards sleep, warm and safe and completely happy. The next year was full of work and joy in equal measure. Catherine proved to be not just skilled with horses, but with people too. When word got out that Carter's wife had a way with difficult mounts, trainers from all over started bringing their problem horses to the Mitchell Ranch. Catherine would work with them patiently, often discovering that the problem was not the horse but the handler. She developed a reputation, and the ranch's income grew steadily. Carter built an addition onto the cabin, giving them more room, a real bedroom, and a sitting area separate from the kitchen. It was still modest, but it felt like a palace to Catherine, who had never had a space she could truly call her own. In the spring, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. She told Carter one evening after dinner, simply taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. We're going to have a baby, she said, and watched his face transform. A baby, he repeated, wonderstruck. When? Late fall, I think. November, maybe early December. Carter pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. Are you scared? Terrified, Catherine admitted, but also happy. Is that strange? No, it's human. He pulled back to look at her. We'll figure it out together. Everything together. The pregnancy was not easy. Catherine was sick for months, barely able to keep anything down. Carter took over the cooking and most of the horsework, refusing to let her do anything strenuous. She chafed at the restrictions, but also appreciated his care. In her father's house, she had been left to handle her mother's illness alone, while he pretended nothing was wrong. With Carter, she never felt abandoned. As her belly grew, so did her fears. She thought of Edward Crane's dead wives, of her own mother who had bled to death giving birth to a son who never drew breath. What if she died? What if the baby died? What if she lost everything she had built with Carter? One night in early November, she woke from a nightmare, gasping. Carter was immediately alert, pulling her against his chest. What is it? What's wrong? I'm scared, Catherine sobbed. What if I die like my mother? What if I leave you alone? You're not going to die, Carter said firmly. I already sent word to Ashfork, the doctor's wife, Mrs. Henderson. She's a trained midwife. She's coming to stay when your time gets close. You're going to be fine. You don't know that. No, but I believe it. And you need to believe it too. He wiped tears from her cheeks. Catherine, you're the strongest person I know. You survived your father trying to kill you. You survived being disowned and starting over with nothing. You can survive this too. And I'll be right here the whole time. His certainty steadied her. Catherine took a deep breath, then another. All right, I'll try. Mrs. Henderson arrived the first week of December, a practical woman in her 50s who immediately took charge. She examined Catherine, declared everything normal, and began preparing for the birth with military efficiency. Carter was banished to worry outside when Catherine's labor started on December 10th. It was long and painful, but not impossible. Mrs. Henderson coached her through it, and Catherine focused on Carter's face in her mind, on the life they had built, on the future she was fighting for. When the baby finally came, wailing and red-faced, Catherine burst into tears of relief and joy. It's a boy, Mrs. Henderson announced, placing the cleaned and wrapped bundle in Catherine's arms. A healthy, angry little boy. Catherine stared down at her son, overwhelmed by love so fierce it hurt. He had dark hair like Carter, and her own blue eyes, and he was perfect. Carter was allowed in a few minutes later. He stood frozen in the doorway, staring at Catherine and the baby, his face working through a dozen emotions. Then he crossed to the bed and carefully sat beside them. A son, he whispered. We have a son. Do you want to hold him? Carter took the baby with shaking hands, cradling him against his chest with infinite care. Hello, he said softly. I'm your papa, and I promise I'm going to do better by you than my father did by me. You're going to know you're loved every single day of your life. Catherine wiped fresh tears away. What should we name him? They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at her husband holding their son, Catherine knew. Thomas, she said, after my father, but not for him, for the man he could have been if he had tried, for the man our son will actually be. Carter looked at her, understanding in his eyes. Thomas Mitchell, I like it. Tommy for short. Tommy, Catherine repeated, testing it. Perfect. Mrs. Henderson stayed another week, making sure both mother and baby were thriving. When she finally left, she hugged Catherine and told her she had done well. You're a natural mother, she said. That boy is lucky to have you. Catherine was not sure about being a natural mother, but she was determined to be a good one. Tommy was a fussy baby who did not sleep much, and there were nights when Catherine paced the floor with him, exhausted and frustrated, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. But then Carter would take the baby and tell her to sleep, and she would wake hours later to find him still walking laps around the cabin, Tommy peaceful against his shoulder. They were partners in this too, figuring it out together. The years flowed past like water, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Tommy grew from a fussy baby into a curious toddler, and then into a bright, energetic boy who loved the horses as much as his parents did. Catherine taught him to read using the books from Carter's shelf, and Carter taught him to ride before he was 5. When Tommy was 3, Catherine got pregnant again. This time she was not as scared, though she was more tired chasing a toddler while growing another baby. Their daughter Maria arrived on a sunny May morning, easier and faster than her brother. She had Catherine's blonde hair and Carter's gray eyes, and she was stubborn from birth. 2 children were plenty, Carter and Catherine agreed, though they were blessed ones. The ranch continued to prosper, and they eventually built a real house, a 2-story structure with separate bedrooms for the children and a big kitchen where Catherine could cook. The old cabin became a bunkhouse for the 2 ranch hands they employed to help with the growing operation. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters and dry summers, years when money was tight, and they worried about making ends meet. Tommy broke his arm falling from a horse when he was 8, and Catherine nearly lost her mind with fear before the doctor said it. Maria caught scarlet fever at 6 and was sick for weeks. Carter's roan mare, the one who had carried Catherine to safety that first night, died of old age when Catherine was 30, and they buried her with honors on a hill overlooking the ranch. But through it all, Catherine and Carter remained constants for each other. They still worked side by side, still sat together in the evenings talking. The passion between them never faded, even after years of marriage. If anything, it deepened, becoming something richer and more complex than the initial attraction. "Do you ever regret it?" Carter asked her one night when they were in their 40s, sitting on the porch of their house watching the sunset. The children were grown and gone, Tommy working a ranch in Colorado, Maria married to a teacher in Flagstaff. Giving up the comfortable life you could have had with Crane? "You mean, do I regret almost freezing to death, being disowned by my father, and living in poverty for the first years of our marriage?" Catherine laughed. "Not for a single second. I got to choose my life, Carter. That's worth everything. And I got you, which is more than I ever hoped for." "I'm the one who got lucky," Carter said, taking her hand. His hair was gray now, and his face was weathered from years in the sun, but his eyes were the same as they had been that first night. "I was drifting before I found you, just existing. You gave me purpose, a reason to build something lasting." "We built it together," Catherine corrected. She leaned her head on his shoulder, comfortable and content. "Everything we have, we made together." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Shadow, ancient now and long retired from work, grazed peacefully in the nearby pasture. The new horses, young stock they were training, moved in the corral. Everything was peaceful, everything was right. "Do you think Tommy will come for Christmas?" Catherine asked. "He said he might in his last letter. If he can get away from work, and Maria already said she and James are coming, bringing the grandchildren." Grandchildren. Catherine smiled at the thought. Maria had 2 boys, rambunctious 4-year-old twins who thought their grandpa could do no wrong. Tommy was not married yet, too focused on his career, but Catherine had hope he would find the right woman eventually. Someone who would love him as fiercely as she loved Carter. "We did good," Carter said quietly. "With the kids, with the ranch, with everything. Your father was wrong about you. You did not end up in poverty or ruin. You thrived." "We thrived," Catherine corrected again. "I could not have done any of it without you." "Partners," Carter said, squeezing her hand. "Partners," Catherine agreed. "Always." As winter approached and the first snow began to fall, Catherine stood at the window of their warm house, watching the flakes drift down. She thought about that night so long ago, when she had been left outside to die, and how it had led to everything good in her life. If someone had told her then that her father's cruelty would result in love and happiness and a life better than anything she had imagined, she would not have believed them. But it was true. From the worst night of her life had come the best. From nearly freezing in the snow had come warmth and love that would last the rest of her days. She had been abandoned and left for dead, but she had survived. More than survived. She had flourished. Christmas came, and with it, both children and all 3 grandchildren. The house was full of noise and laughter, exactly as Catherine liked it. They gathered around the big table Carter had built years ago, eating the feast Catherine and Maria had prepared. The twins told loud, rambling stories about their adventures at school. James discussed his latest students. Tommy talked about the ranch he was managing. Carter carved the turkey and made terrible jokes that everyone groaned at. It was perfect, chaotic and messy and loud and perfect. After dinner, when the children were playing in the snow and the adults were sitting by the fire, Tommy pulled Catherine aside. "Ma, I wanted to tell you something." "What is it?" "I met someone, a woman who works at the ranch, training cutting horses. Her name's Sarah. His face lit up as he spoke. She's smart and funny, and she does not take any nonsense from anyone. She reminds me of you, actually. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. Are you happy? I am. Really happy. I think I'm going to ask her to marry me. Then I'm happy too. She hugged him tight. Bring her to meet us in the spring. I want to meet the woman who captured your heart. I will. Tommy pulled back, looking at her seriously. Ma, I need to ask you something. Do you think you could have been happy if things had gone differently? If Grandpa Kane had not locked you out that night? If you had married Edward Crane? Catherine did not have to think about it. No, I would have survived, maybe, but I would not have been happy. Your father taught me that survival and happiness are different things. You should never settle for just surviving, Tommy. You should hold out for happiness, even when it seems impossible. That's what I'm doing, Tommy said. Sarah makes me happy, the way Pa makes you happy. Then you're doing exactly right. Catherine kissed his cheek. I'm proud of you, son. She went back to the fire, where Carter was holding one of the twins on his lap, reading a story. He looked up and smiled at her, and Catherine's heart swelled with love. After all these years, after everything they had been through, that smile still had the power to undo her. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed and the house was finally quiet, Catherine and Carter lay together in their room. The window was open a crack, letting in cold air that made the blankets feel even warmer. Thank you, Catherine said into the darkness. For what? For finding me. For saving me. For giving me the life I always dreamed of but never thought I could have. Carter rolled onto his side, facing her. Even in the darkness, she could feel the intensity of his gaze. I should be thanking you. You turned a cabin into a home, a drifter into a father, a lonely existence into a life worth living. Everything good I have because of you. We saved each other, Catherine said. That night in the snow, you saved my body. But I think I saved your soul. Or maybe we saved each other's souls. Either way, we were meant to find each other. I believe that, Carter said. He pulled her close, and Catherine tucked herself against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I believe we were always meant to be here, exactly like this. Catherine thought about fate and chance, about the terrible things that had led to wonderful ones. Her father had tried to break her, but instead he had freed her. The worst night of her life had become the catalyst for the best years. There was poetry in that, justice even. She thought about the girl she had been, huddled against a cabin door, certain she was going to die. If she could go back and tell that girl what was coming, all the love and happiness and purpose that waited just a few miles away, in the form of a cowboy with gray eyes and a good heart, would that girl believe her? Probably not. But that was all right. Some things you had to live through to understand. Some miracles you had to experience firsthand. I love you, Catherine whispered. I love you too, Carter said. Always have. Always will. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, warm and safe while the snow fell outside. In the morning, there would be grandchildren to play with, horses to tend, a life to continue living. But for now, there was just this. Two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a light together that would never go out. The years continued their steady march. Tommy married his Sarah in a ceremony at the ranch, and Catherine immediately loved her new daughter-in-law, who was indeed smart and tough and perfect for her son. They had a daughter 2 years later, named Catherine after her grandmother. Maria's twins grew into fine young men, both choosing to work with horses like their grandfather. The ranch expanded, acquired more land, became one of the most respected training operations in Arizona. But through all the changes, some things remained constant. Carter and Catherine, partners in everything, still working side by side even as their bodies slowed and their hair went white. The love between them, tested by time and hardship, remained as strong as ever. When Catherine was 62, she got sick, a cough that would not go away, weight that dropped off despite her best efforts to eat. The doctor in Ash Fork called it consumption and said there was not much to be done. Carter refused to accept it, tried every treatment and remedy he could find, but Catherine knew. She had seen her mother waste away. She knew what was coming. "I'm not afraid," she told Carter on a warm spring evening as they sat on the porch, her body wrapped in blankets despite the mild weather. "I've had a good life, a full one, more than I ever dreamed of. I'm grateful for every moment." "Don't talk like that," Carter said, his voice rough. "You're going to be fine." "Carter." She took his hand, feeling how it trembled. "Look at me." He did, and she saw fear in his gray eyes, the first real fear she had seen there since that night he had faced down her father. "I'm dying," she said gently. "We both know it, and I need you to let me say what I need to say while I still can." "Catherine, hush, let me talk." She squeezed his hand. "You gave me everything. You saved my life, not just that night in the snow, but every day after. You showed me what love was supposed to be, what partnership looked like. You gave me children and grandchildren and a home. You made me happier than I ever thought possible. And I need you to know that I would not change a single thing. Not one moment, not one choice. It was all worth it." Tears ran down Carter's weathered face. "I can't lose you. You won't. I'll always be with you. In the horses we trained, in the children we raised, in every corner of this ranch we built together. And when your time comes, I'll be waiting. We'll find each other again, just like we did before. Promise?" "I promise." Catherine smiled, even though it hurt. "Death is just another adventure." "Right? And we've always been good at adventures." She lasted another month, long enough to see Tommy's daughter take her first steps, long enough to tell each of her children how much she loved them, long enough to say everything that needed saying. Carter never left her side, holding her hand through the bad nights, reading to her during the days, making sure she was as comfortable as possible. On a June morning when the wildflowers were blooming and the world smelled of summer, Catherine slipped away quietly, Carter's hand in hers, his voice the last thing she heard as he told her he loved her one final time. The funeral was large, attended by people from all over Arizona who had known Catherine or worked with her or simply heard stories about the woman who had survived being left in the snow and built an empire from nothing. Tommy spoke about his mother's strength. Maria talked about her kindness. Carter said nothing, too broken to find words. They buried her on the hill next to the old roan mare overlooking the ranch. Carter visited the grave every day, talking to her about the horses, the grandchildren, the weather, everything and nothing. People worried about him after Catherine died. He was 70 years old and suddenly alone after nearly 40 years of marriage. Tommy wanted him to come live in Colorado. Maria wanted him to move to Flagstaff, but Carter refused. The ranch was his home, the place he and Catherine had built together. He would not leave it. But something had gone out of him with Catherine's death. He still did the work, still trained the horses, but there was no joy in it anymore. He was just going through the motions, waiting. On a cold December night, almost exactly 40 years after he had found Catherine in the snow, Carter went to bed and did not wake up. He died peacefully in his sleep, and when they found him, there was a smile on his face. They buried him next to Catherine on the hill. The whole family came, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all the lives that had sprung from a chance encounter on a snowy night so long ago. Tommy spoke about his father's integrity, his strength, his love for his wife. Maria talked about how Carter had showed her what a good man looked like, setting the standard for the husband she would eventually choose. And young Catherine, Tommy's daughter, who carried her grandmother's name, placed wildflowers on both graves and said a prayer that wherever they were now, they had found each other again. The ranch continued, passed down to Tommy and then to his children, each generation adding their own touches, but keeping the core of what Carter and Katherine had built. The story of how it all started became family legend, the tale of the girl left in the snow and the cowboy who saved her, told and retold until it took on mythic proportions. But at its heart, it was simple. Two people had found each other in the darkness, had chosen each other every day after, and had built something lasting from that choice: love and partnership, and the determination to make their own fate rather than accepting the one others tried to force on them. It was a story about survival and strength, about refusing to be broken, about the power of choosing your own path even when it seemed impossible. It was about family and home and building something from nothing. But most of all, it was a love story, the kind that lasted beyond death, the kind that echoed through generations. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Carter and Katherine were together again, partners still, walking through wildflower meadows and working with wild horses, their love as strong as ever, eternal and unbreakable, exactly as it had always been meant to be.